Welcome to the Faith and Mental Health Podcast, where two worlds collide. I am your host, DeAndrea Bolden. Join myself and others as we have relevant, engaging conversation on a variety of topics that are related to faith and mental health. So be sure to tune in weekly and also to subscribe. Did you know that you can listen to this podcast on all major podcast platforms, such as Apple, Google, and even Stitcher? You can even catch this podcast on my YouTube channel. As a listener, please know that we want to hear from you, and we hope that you would reach out with feedback, suggestions, and even ideas for guests and topics that you would like for us to include. Oh, do you mind helping me out by simply sharing this podcast with others? Thank you, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. God bless.
Lifestyle brand Sugar Sweet Bath and Body Treats offer a variety of high-quality self-care products that are cruelty-free and made with natural ingredients. Their product selection ranges from their amazing bath bombs and scrubs to their top-selling body butter. Be sure to check them out on their website, and if you subscribe to their email list, you get 20% off your purchase. You can find them online by logging on to www.sugarsweetbathtreats.com.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, DeAndrea Bolden, and you are tuned in to the Faith and Mental Health Podcast. Today, I have a very phenomenal guest. I'm so excited to have her on today. And so you know how I am. I'm not going to introduce her. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. But I will tell you this much. She's a heavy hitter, and she has so much to share. And her name is Dr. Holly Oxhandler. Dr. Holly, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Good morning, DeAndrea. I am so honored to be here. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. Yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit about who I am and my background. So I am an Associate Dean for Research and Faculty Development at Baylor University's Diana Garland School of Social Work. I co-host a podcast called CXMH, which has conversations on the intersection of faith and mental health, much like the good work that you are doing. And I'm a mom. I have two kiddos. My husband and I, we live here in Waco, Texas. Let's see what else. I'm originally from upstate New York. And I am in the process of launching my first book called The Soul of the Helper: 7 Stages to Seeing the Sacred Within Yourself so you can see the sacred in others. And I'm so honored to be here today.
Awesome. I'm excited to kind of dive in and talk about that book now. And well, let's kind of segue. So before we get to the book, and I really like the title. I think the title really drew me in. And you put a statement on Twitter, I believe it was. I think it was on Twitter, maybe Instagram too. And I even turned it into a post and tagged you in it.
Oh, you did? Oh,
yeah.
That's awesome.
It should. You know what? Maybe I didn't. Well, it has your name on it. I made it, and it says Dr. Holly Oxhandler. Like, I gave you full credit, but I may have to go back and actually tag you in it. But you said something about, and so we'll get into the book in a minute. But I like how you said you cannot separate mental health from your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
That quote blew me away. I was retweeting and I was like, let me put this on my Faith and Mental Health Instagram page, Faith and Mental Health Facebook page, because it was so powerful, because I believe in integrative care. I believe we have to evolve and realize, like the Bible says, that I pray that the Lord would sanctify you, body, soul, and spirit. And so there's more than one aspect of us. So yeah, we have our mental health, we have our physical health, we have our spiritual health. And so we have to make sure we're looking at every part of us. And so can you just share a little insight about that quote and what you really mean by allowing your spiritual journey to be a part of your mental health? Because to me, it sounds like that's the meat of what it means when I say faith and mental health.
Yeah, gosh, that's so good. Well, I'm honored that you picked up on that quote, and I'm so honored that it landed in the way that it did for you, because I think actually it was maybe Robert Vore who had kind of elevated it. He's one of the folks who had, well, he's my co-host on the podcast, and he
Okay.
had read the book in advance. But um, that has really been at the heartbeat of the research that I've done. I know I shared that, the different hats that I wear, I kind of
Mhm.
talked about earlier, but really at the heart of what I do is researching and studying this intersection between faith and mental health. I've been doing this research for the last 12 or 13 years or so. And it's really come about from this understanding that our if we are biopsychosocial spiritual beings, which we
Yes.
talk about in social work and
Mhm.
in many other helping professions, that means each part of these layers of who we are matter.
Right.
In some of the research that I had done earlier in my career, we found that when it came to mental health treatment, a lot of clients, they wanted to talk about their faith as it
Mhm.
related to their mental health. We saw that when you ethically integrate clients' faith into mental health treatment, it oftentimes either is as effective or more effective than treatment without paying attention to this area of people's lives. And so I've really tried to understand, primarily like, well, what are mental health care providers doing when it comes to this area? But then it's just grown further outside of that circle to really understand, like, how do we as helpers really need to be paying attention to this intersection? Because we can't disentangle them. I mean, we all are navigating a spiritual journey of some kind, and it may look differently for each of us. We may have different experiences and things that we believe and practices that we engage in, but we're all engaged on this spiritual journey in one way, shape, or form. And at the same time, we all have mental health, right? Like it
Right.
is a spectrum, ranging from illness and struggling to flourishing and thriving and health. And so, for both of these things, we really have to consider them in tandem with one another because of what the research has been saying about how deeply interconnected they are with one another. So I think that kind of goes back to that quote around our we can't consider our spiritual journey without our mental health. But the same is true in the other direction. We can't consider our mental health journey without taking into consideration our spirituality.
That's good. That's good. So when you look at that, and I like how you shared, your research and, some of the findings and different things like that. I'd love to see some of your research, by the way. But
Hmm.
wondering, how do you look at that through a biblical lens?
That's a really good question. Well, I want to be forthright in that I am not a theologian. I'm not a biblical scholar. I am not someone who, has that training. I do identify as Christian, and I teach and do research at a Christian institution. So
Mhm.
I do want to at least navigate that carefully and with humility that I am not, a trained theologian.
You
Now,
know what? And I want to interject there. And to those that are listening, I don't want you to feel even underqualified because you're not a theologian, because I think sometimes
mm,
that it's just the simplicity of it. So what I mean by that is like the scripture where it says, "Beloved, I wish above all thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers." So that's what I
mm.
mean when I say like looking at it from a biblical lens, like just kind of looking at from a scriptural place and not from a, I guess, like a deep theological place.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think that's good. Well, I think what I can say, and I can kind of use this as like a bit of a segue into the book, is that I do weave in layers of scripture into this
Yes.
book in
Yes.
understanding. There's a chapter, for example, on stillness, and I heavily rely on Psalm 46:10, where, we understand God saying, be still and know that I'm God.
That's good.
I rely on the understanding of that the kingdom of heaven is within us, and
Mm.
leaning on that. And I heavily rely on the teaching that Jesus offers, that that is in the Old Testament, but Jesus
Mhm.
elevates it across all four gospels when he says to love our neighbors as ourselves. And
Yeah,
so that is deeply woven into the book with this understanding and questioning of how can we love others if we are not loving ourselves?
that's very
Like,
true.
yeah. And I think we lose sight of that, especially in a number of different spaces where we're so oriented. And again, this ties back in with the book of because it's heavily written for helpers in general.
That's
But
good.
as helpers, we tend to constantly be thinking about how do we serve others? How do we help others? How do we love others? How do we care for others?
Mhm.
But when we don't take that time to care for ourselves and refill our own wells, my fear is what is it that we're drawing on to give to others when we are in a place of burnout and exhaustion
Man, that is
and just
good.
mhm. Yep. So that's what I really, I mean, and the way that it's structured is that first part of it is really focused on that intersection of faith and mental health and understanding what is the research saying around this intersection and the complexity of these areas of our lives. And I write then a bit about recognizing in the data that mental health care providers who are more deeply motivated to live out their faith tend to have more positive views and
Mhm.
actually integrate clients' faith more often. And so from that, I drew on this Hindi term, namaste, which literally translates to mean I bow to you. But
Mhm.
more generally, we understand it to mean like the sacred in me recognizes the sacred in you, or the
Okay.
divine in me recognizes the divine in you. And that discovery within my data, it fundamentally transformed so much of my research and the way that I honestly like just went about life, to be honest. And so that became kind of the springboard into the second part of the book, which is really an introspective unpacking of the research within my own life and
Mhm.
what it's like to be a helper and how I see this stretching out to other helpers beyond just mental health care providers.
That's good.
Um, yeah.
I
So,
like how what you said earlier when you said what are people drawing from if they're not basically if they're not taking care of
yeah.
themselves. I always tell
Yeah.
people, I said you cannot do anything at your best if you're not your best. That means you can't be
Yeah.
the best spouse, you can't be the
Yeah.
best parent, you can't be the best employer or employee or whatever it is. But I really think that this would be a great book for a lot of pastors,
Yes.
Christian counselors, I mean anybody in general, but when you said the burnout part, my mind immediately went to pastors because a lot of pastors are
Yeah.
burnt out, and this last year or so has
Oh my
burnt
gosh, I know.
everybody out. And so a lot of
Yep.
pastors are pretty much at their rope, kind of giving in
Yeah.
and stuff. And so I think that this can be very important. But I do think I want to say this. I think I worded that last question wrong because you turned around and answered it. I think the way I I think the way I worded it just threw you off because you're like, I'm not a theologian. But then when you start talking about the
Oh,
book, you're like, that's what I wanted. I just wanted to know like what biblically can we put with this. And so you put
mm,
it together and it's weaved in the book. And so I love that. So I want to take a step back. Like, when did you get the concept of this book? Like, where did this come from? How did this happen? Did you just want to share your research? How did this even come into play?
oh my gosh, it's such a good question. I love that one. So so I think it started earlier on in recognizing. I think I started having these little nudges that were like, I think that this is relevant to a wider group, right? And that it's not just for mental health care providers, but as you noted, pastors, but also like nurses and doctors and
Oh, yeah.
parents and first responders and teachers and volunteers. I mean, this is like helpers in general.
Mhm.
But it was really in developing that grounded theory, namaste theory, and going back to the roots of that term and understanding it and seeing how that applied to the research. That's when I think I started kind of getting those rumblings, and that was back in like 2017. And then and it was a little bit before that, like I kind of had a sense that this was coming, but then around 2018, it was really clear to me that like I was at a point where I couldn't not write this book, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
it was I mean, not in a negative way. It was just like, it really felt like this was my next step. Like this was mine to do. Like I needed to write this book. And so I know you and I exchanged a little bit on Twitter about this and like how long it took for me to write this book.
Yeah.
Because in writing it, there's a lot of data that is woven into it. There's a lot of details about faith traditions that are woven into it as humbly as I can possibly, weave those in.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a lot of, so I used what's called autoethnography, which is I know this is going to sound like it's super researchy, but basically it's a process of writing through and embodying the research and what it means for me and how I have lived into this intersection individually.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I just have a tickle in my throat.
Okay.
So in writing through this, I think between about 2018 until, even up until this summer, even through the editing, it's just been a long
Process. Yeah.
a long process of writing, but honestly, like it has fundamentally transformed me writing this book and understanding these concepts. And gosh, my hope with it is that it will serve those helpers who are feeling tired and worn and losing sight of the fact that they are beloved as they are, and that nothing they do can make them be any more loved than they are in this moment or any less loved than they are in this moment, that they are loved as they are. And so that's really kind of what my hope is as we're moving into this next phase of the book getting into folks' hands.
Yeah. Because well, I'll get to that in a minute. So I want to, one thing about it, when it comes to mental health, that mental health has become in some ways kind of a buzzword. People are becoming more aware of the importance of mental health. People are promoting the importance of professional mental health services and treatments and all these things. But one thing, the reason this book stuck out to me so much is because when I saw the title, I immediately thought self-care. Self-care has become the big buzzword. Like my daughter, she is 17. She owns her own little business. It's called Sugar Sweet Bath and Body Treats. And a lot of the things she makes and sells are personal care items that people may use for one component of self-care. And so self-care in some ways has been almost made synonymous with, taking a bubble bath and putting cucumbers on your eyes. But I like how this book deals with actually doing the work of taking care of yourself. Because like you said, you can't see the good in others if you can't see the good in yourself. One thing I've learned as a person is that the way a person talks to and treats others is a reflection of how they deal with themselves. So when a person has a very negative inner voice, they will speak very negatively to other people. And so I think this book is so important just for people in general. I like how you talked about the chapter on being still. I think that's very important because in this fast-paced world we live in, and social media and notifications going off and Netflix is going, the dog is barking, the toaster is chirping, the rooster is crowing, everything's going at once. The one thing I think a lot of believers have to understand, like the word says, he's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. We have to learn how in a technologically advanced society to still be still. We have to understand the power of being still. We have to understand the healing that we can get in being still and meditating on God's word, allowing his word to really wash over us. And so I'm excited about this book, and I can't wait to really dive into it. But there was something that caught my eye that I want you to talk about in this book before we move on. And there's a chapter called Serve. And the reason
Yeah.
this is important is because,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I cannot,
Mm,
first of all, as believers, we should be found serving. Second of
mm,
all, if everything you do is about you, you're going to be a miserable person. We have to learn to serve something greater than ourselves. And so, but I want you to
mhm.
talk about that chapter, serve, and even as it relates to, the soul of the helper when they're serving, you got to be in a good place to do that.
That is so true. So true. Well, okay, real quick, before I jump into serve, which
Mhm.
I promised to, I do want to circle back about the self-care piece
Okay.
and
Yeah.
one, applaud your daughter and the good work that she's doing to help others in this business. Like that's
Yeah.
beautiful that she's doing that. I love that. And you're right that self-care has become a buzzword in a lot of ways. And there are lots of different ways that we can practice self-care, some of them being the ways that your daughter is helping with those,
Mhm.
those bath things and just all those goodies that she's putting
Yep.
together. But I will say self-care is something that I honestly see as more of a preventative, intentional effort to be taking care of ourselves holistically, mind,
Mhm.
body, spirit, and social connections. Um, so that we are keeping our well full as we go out and serve others. And this is as simple as like making sure we're getting enough sleep, making sure we're
Mhm.
drinking enough water, eating the foods that help make us feel good.
Yep.
And none of it is to, like, I definitely don't want any of this to be like, there's no shame woven into this. It's just identifying, for each of your listeners, like, what do they individually need to take care of themselves to the best of their ability? That is what I really see self-care being. And I do have, for listeners who are interested, on my website, I have a self-care for helpers guide. That's like a
Oh.
1 week of ways to walk through creating your self-care plan, and actually like embody it. So I just want to nod to that. Just, I'm so
Yeah.
glad you brought up the self-care piece, but I wanted to nod to that. It does weave in though to the serve section. So I am glad that you asked about that. So
Yeah.
you are right. We can't be thinking about ourselves all the time. It's not healthy. I would say it's not fulfilling. There are things that we have been, there are things that we have been given to do that are just ours to do, and that we need to be intentional about and thinking about. And those things are in ways serving others. And it doesn't have to be, service doesn't have to look like any like specific thing. It
Mhm.
could be, the mental health care provider who is serving their client. It could be the barista who is serving her customers each morning. It could be the pastor who is serving their congregants, or the first responder, or the teacher serving their students, or the parent serving their kids. There's just so many ways that we get to go out and serve others. And it is a privilege to get to serve and support others along their journey. Now, in this chapter, though,
Mhm.
it is at the end of those 7 stages,
Yeah.
which go from speed, slow, steady, still, um, wait,
See.
see, shift, and serve. Thank you.
Yep. I got.
um, you're looking at it. I love it.
Uh-huh.
But the point is that earlier in that middle part under still and see, we
Mhm.
have to see the sacred within ourselves in order to see it in others before we can then shift into that shift chapter and recognize that that sacred, that divine spark is not just within us, but it
Mhm.
is within everyone around us, like everyone. And
Mhm.
how we can then, um, intentionally seek the sacred within others, while also remembering that that sacred and that divine spark is within us, is how we then go out and serve. And we serve from that place of abundance and recognition that the sacred, the divine spark, the image of God is in me as much as it is within everybody around me.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's good. That's good. That's good. I'm excited. So, couple of things. Is the book available for pre-orders? Are you allowing people to pre-order, or do they have to wait until it's released?
Oh, yeah, no, it is absolutely up for pre-order right now.
Oh,
And
good.
it's wherever folks buy their books. So if it's like a local indie shop, or if on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, like wherever folks buy their books.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Now, what is the actual release date?
Yeah, so it is set to release at the end of January, on January 25th. And which feels far away, but also not at all, because we've got, some holidays coming up that are going to make time go by pretty quickly.
Oh,
I think
it's about to fly by, because it's about to be. You already know, once it's Thanksgiving, it's already Christmas.
I know. And then New Year's, and then yes, that's right. So I'm trying to I really am trying to practice what I preach, and slow down and be intentional through these weeks. But I am so excited for it to get in folks' hands, in just a couple of months at the end of January.
That is really, really good. And so I'm excited about this. I'm so glad that I was able to, again, thank you for allowing me to switch some things around and make sure we can make this happen today. But
yes.
I'm glad to be able to introduce you to my audience. I'm glad that people will know about this book. I'm excited for you, excited for your accomplishment. I think sometimes people don't realize, it's a little segue, guys. I don't think people realize how much work goes into writing books. And so I want to first applaud you for your efforts in doing this, and to be brave enough to do it, because anything you put out there, even if it's just a t-shirt or a pencil that says Dr. Holly, you're making yourself vulnerable. So applaud you for being brave enough to step out there and do this. But I've been telling people, as we're getting ready to, get closer to 2022, and we're gearing up for the Faith and Mental Health Hybrid Summit. I'm like, I really feel a strong pull that we're going to need to take it up a notch with mental health. I really promoting people, getting the care. I know even since last year, a lot more people are dealing with anxiety. I was reading an article that dentists are reporting more people clenching their teeth. People have been clenching and grinding their teeth. There was another report. I try to keep up on stuff. I do a lot of reading.
I love it. No, it's amazing.
I try to, keep up with stuff like that, like different statistics and different things that are coming out. And it's just, they were talking about even people being more prone to illness. And I'm not going to say the illness, because I don't want my podcast to get dinged, because you just never know. But with, a certain illness that's been going around, that that mental health can be a factor in people being more vulnerable. And so, and we know that, anxiety and stress can affect your immune system. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yep. And we did see that through the last 2 years or last year and a half or so, we did see that the percentage of folks who reported symptoms of anxiety and depression had gone up to between 30 to 40% at different time points, when typically it's usually about 1 out of 5 who are struggling with mental illness at one time point. But it spiked. I mean, we are going to be moving through a lot of recovery and healing.
Oh yeah.
In the months and years ahead, to be honest.
Oh yeah. And that's why, I think your book is going to be timely. The conference that's coming up is going to be timely. Having those resources and those tools in place that can be helpful as we are all trying to navigate through uncertain times and things that we've frankly never endured before. And so, but I want you to take a moment and let people know how they can find you, as far as like your website, social media handles, where, well, you already said where they can get the book, but give your website and stuff like that, how people can contact you, how they can connect with you. If you have anything else coming up, if you have anything else going on. I know you also co-host a podcast, so let people know how they can connect with you as far as that particular podcast.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to, DeAndrea. Thank you. So my website is hollyoxhandler.com, and folks can find me on any social media at Holly Oxhandler. I mentioned before that self-care for helpers guide that folks can sign up for when they go to my website. There's like a little button for them to sign up, and it's just 7 days of prompts to help them create their self-care plan that's based on an assignment I offer my students. And then I send out monthly newsletters about this intersection of faith and mental health.
Okay.
And then the podcast, as you mentioned, is a weekly podcast called CXMH that folks can learn more about at cxmhpodcast.com. And yeah, those are weekly and fun conversations that we get to have. And I think that's probably, excuse me. Yeah, that's probably good. And then of course I mentioned the book, folks can find that anywhere, wherever they buy their books. It is up and ready for pre-order. So.
Awesome. And so thank you so much again, Dr. Holly Oxhandler, for being my guest today. Thank you to all the listeners that are tuning in. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. And so I'm going to be sharing some more information, on our next episode about the Faith and Mental Health Summit that is coming up April 2022. And so I'm really excited for that. We're gearing up for it. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be bigger and better than this last year. And so look out for that. And so I will see you guys. Well, you'll hear my voice again soon. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.